Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending today. Today's webinar is on KwikPayables with AP automation from our friends at QuickTag and OnChoice. I'm Scott Jorgens, Director of Marketing here at Endeavour Solutions, and many of you may be coming through one of our sub-brands at GP Support North. So, as per the webinar invite, we're going to be talking about AP automation, specifically how you can reduce your costs, increase visibility into audit trails, find any bottlenecks, uncover and really see more about your whole invoice automation and payables process, and ultimately streamline those processes, which is going to result in saving time and effort, both for the approvers as well as on your finance team.
So the first thing that we're going to talk about, thank you, Michael, for that great introduction, and Scott for welcoming us to the conversation today. We're really excited to share with you the challenges that maybe many of you can relate to. Maybe that's what brought you to the conversation today about automating your AP system. So here's some of the things that not only our customers tell us, but also that research supports, and we'll give you some details, examples of both of those things. So in today's environment, let's pretend that we weren't all living in a pandemic for a moment and it was business as usual, if any of us can remember that from a year ago or more. We had paper coming into our business. We had processes that were being delayed because that paper was sitting on somebody's desk. We couldn't find documents when vendors called, or when a colleague called, or whoever it was that needed information. We in accounts payable or in related teams simply spent too much time looking for documents. In fact, research suggests that 30 to 40% of our time is spent looking for documents. Here's what's interesting about that. Fast forward to the age of COVID. Now, even though we're more digitally connected, we now spend up to 50% of our time looking for documents because we're in a remote environment. We maybe don't have access to exactly the same files and document types and things like that that we used to. So we spend too much time looking for documents, and certainly paper makes that more of a challenge. Visibility. Well, again, pre-COVID, it was tough enough to know if something was sitting on somebody's desk or down the hall or whatever. Now in the world of COVID, we're all working remotely, many of us, and don't have visibility into where documents, especially invoices, are in their approval process. We're talking about our cash management here. We're talking about the process by which we, fundamentally work on the financials that affect our business. We're paying our bills. We're dealing with getting things out of the door on time, and at the same time dealing with angry vendors calling us saying, hey, what's the status of that invoice? Where's my payment? Right? So we have no visibility into that process, and 40% of organizations say they struggle, especially even more since COVID, with tracking those invoices and their approvals. And then finally, compliance requirements and audit. 90% of companies are challenged by financial close and audits, primarily because of the first two reasons we just talked about. They don't have access to the documents they need to support their due diligence and their audit preparation, and they don't have visibility into where those things might live. Now, interestingly, the bottom line here in the blue bar, it says, as CFOs are looking to reinvent their businesses as they come out of the pandemic, nearly a third, and this number continues to climb, we see it in the data, look to tech-driven products and services to really help them solve these problems. And 54% of these CFOs of these organizations plan to keep at least some remote work in place. So we've got to get used to this. We've got to figure this out, and we've got to get really good at it. And automation, especially AI-driven supported processes, can really help us with our automation and can help us get out of this pandemic with automation as part of our solution. Now, specifically, let's talk about what happens with our invoices. And this is, again, research supported by industry data, and it shows the top 5 AP challenges. And this relates specifically to your invoice processes. Your invoicers are coming into your organization, again, maybe today on paper, to an office that somebody has to go to. You might have noticed Michael and I are actually in the office today, which is a rare occasion. I think the last time we saw each other in person in the office was maybe June of last year.
Yeah.
Maybe once.
Yeah, it was a little strange.
It's been a while, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So not a very common occurrence at all, just so happens. But you know what? When I do come into the office, the only other people here are our accounting team, because they on occasion still have to come in to, deal with finances and signing the checks and paying the bills and that sort of thing. So what leads to this challenge is the manual data entry and the inefficient processes that surround the way we work with our invoices and pay our bills today. Okay, and the manual routing of that, 74% of organizations say they're challenged with their number one issue is manual data entry and the inefficient processes that follow. And then number two on that, 68%, the routing of those invoices for review and approval. So keep those numbers in mind, especially as you're building your business case. As Michael mentioned, this is really important. Tiffany's going to highlight it in the demonstration as to how automation, especially AI-driven data extraction in that automation process, can really help. And those two top things really lead to what I call the symptoms of the next three: discrepancies, exceptions, human error, lost and missing invoices, and then of course many of them because they're on paper. So we know that technology will help us continue to operate, be more efficient, and certainly stay competitive after the pandemic. And the question now isn't whether we should do this or not. It's really about how fast we can do it. We hear this from customers on a regular basis, so maybe you can relate. Now, one other thing we're going to touch on in terms of the why is why cloud? Because as many of us look to move to an automated process of some sort, there's still that issue of where does the infrastructure live and who's going to manage it and how do I have to update it and how frequently do I need to do upgrades and updates and system environmental checks, that sort of thing. Keep everything healthy and up and running. Well, at QuickTag, we've learned very quickly many times, because our customers have said, hey, this would really help us as we move to these remote environments and whatnot, is if we had access to the cloud. And so we've put together solutions that are available for you in the cloud. Of course, we still offer them on premises if that's your preferred infrastructure and environment. But as you move to the cloud, here's the considerations. You get to a solution much faster. Somebody else is managing it, so you don't need dedicated IT staff. Your team does have that anywhere access to the documents, the invoices, the approval workflows, etc. And the security is covered, so you get peace of mind. You don't have to worry about whether your documents might be exposed to somebody who's not supposed to have access to them. And of course, you're going to be up to date and current on all the software and the environment along the way. And it's going to be managed by the QuickTag experts, because our team lives and breathes this. So they're going to manage your environment just as we would care for our own and make sure that you have access to what you need. Now, so how are we going to solve that problem? We're going to look at our AP automation process with what we call KwikPayables, as Scott and Michael both mentioned in the introduction. And what you're going to see is an intelligent, touchless AP automation solution that's driven by AI-based data extraction and some really intense integration with GP. I'm not going to steal any of Tiffany's thunder. She's going to show you how amazing all this is. But here's what's going to happen. The process flow is going to start digital, it's going to stay digital throughout, and it's going to integrate with your GP system. So the invoices will be captured digitally, data will be extracted wherever possible, invoices will be workflow routed according to your approval rules, and then the payables or purchasing transactions will be created inside of GP, as you will see in this demonstration. So Tiffany is going to walk us through a few examples here, and then we will keep the conversation going and continue the demo and discussion as we go through the conversation in this morning's webinar. So without any further ado, Tiff, I just made you presenter.
Thank you, Mary.
Of course.
We again are thrilled to be here today. Let me know, Mary, when you can see my screen. All right.
You're good.
Okay, perfect. Mary, fantastic background, and I love, we can always rely on Mary and the Scots in marketing to keep us up to date with the latest in terms of statistics. Those were some new ones in there for me in terms of the transitions that we're seeing for businesses coming out of COVID. So thanks for the detail. Let's try and highlight here the efficiencies that can be gained with QuickPayables now. What I'm highlighting is our web interface, and that's exactly how easily anybody is able to access our application. It is via web interface, secure username and password. And today I'm going to put on the hat of an AP clerk or an AP manager, and I have invoices to work. We're going to do all sorts of invoices today. We're going to do a three-way match, we're going to do a two-way match, and then we're going to do just a standard payable as well. I'm going to do all the purchase order matches for you guys. So that's the queue that I'm in now. As an AP clerk or manager, I can have my screen, my QuickTag screen, default directly to task. And here are all the, in this instance, Intermatch, here are all the three-way match invoices that have come in. And when I say come in, it really goes back to one of those boxes Mary was highlighting, is that we do receive invoices digitally. Obviously, a lot of your vendors are probably forwarding in invoices via email, and we will start to manage and extract those invoices real time for you. So these are invoices that have come in either electronically and we've picked up via email, or you can certainly leverage your local printer or scanner. We set that up with an email address. If you are still getting some snail mail invoices, you can scan those in. They'll come directly into this queue. I like to hang out on this page though for just a moment, because in this, what we call a grid view here, you'll notice there's a ton of information. There's vendor names, document numbers, invoice dates, there's totals. And the reason being is because the first stage in the process of KwikPayables is to pass the invoice through ktIQ. That's our intelligent data extraction tool that is going to read key fields of information via AI. AI is artificial intelligence, intelligence and machine learning. So it is new age OCR, if you will, to ensure that we can extract key fields of data and tackle one of those biggest challenges for you guys, which is the manual data entry. So let's see what that looks like. You can click anywhere on the line and it's going to pop the invoice into view. So if you were searching for a particular invoice, you certainly could navigate to that. But when you hit the edit or the pencil icon here, that's what allows you to start to work the invoice. And as I do that, the first thing I'm presented with here today, guys, is a duplicate detection warning. And the reason being is because ktIQ read the invoice and they know that we have already down here, this says purchasing invoice entry for Fabricam. I've already paid this particular invoice for Uline twice. Obviously, I use the same sample invoice a couple times in a row, guys. And then above, it's also highlighting that I have, again, that same invoice number for Uline in an edit stage. It's under review and process. So immediately, I'm presented with the fact that this could be a potential duplicate, because not only do we extract the data, but we bump it up against GP and we say, hey, is this a valid vendor? Is this a valid purchase order number? Is this a valid invoice number? So this is going to ensure that you are not wasting any time processing a potential duplicate invoice. So I'm going to go ahead and put Endeavour on the tail end of this document number to ensure that we don't continue to get those warnings squawked at us through the process here. But let's take a peek and see the power of ktIQ, the data extraction tool. First thing you'll note is that it's populated both the vendor ID and the vendor name. On the right-hand side here, we're obviously going to extract the vendor name, but we also look at the email, not the email address, we also look at the address and the phone number, because there are often times that you guys may have multiple vendor IDs set up for a particular vendor. We're always real-time connected. So if I started to type ahead here, you'll see active vendors in the system. And here's a good example. I started to type in Inter, right? An International Telecom Association, same exact vendor, two different vendor IDs because they have different addresses. So the system is intelligently going to extract both name, address, and phone number to ensure we pull back the appropriate vendor ID. If for some reason we do not, you certainly have that type ahead functionality that you're able to go ahead and grab the appropriate vendor. Other things to note is it accurately picked up the invoice date, October 28th, October or August. Can't talk yet this morning, still early for me. But the key component here, guys, is because this is a purchase order number. So think, obviously, the requisition was completed, the purchase order was completed, the receipt has been completed, and now the invoice is in. So what QuickTag did is we went ahead and we read the purchase order number off this particular invoice. And as we did so, we queried Dynamics GP for any available lines for this particular PO. So we're not entering this information in. We did not expect ktIQ to read the line within the body of the actual invoice. We read the actual purchase order number here. We went to Dynamics GP and retrieved all of those applicable lines. Now, If for some reason some of these boxes came in damaged, I could certainly short pay if I needed to, just as you can in Dynamics GP. You also could update, maybe you negotiated a lower rate on this. You could also update the unit cost. But in all reality, what's happened here is while we spent quite a bit of time on this particular invoice, what we found is we have a match. So that's simple. ktIQ did all the heavy lifting. It extracted all the key data. It extracted the purchase order number. It intelligently looked into GP to confirm that receipt. And we do have a PO match. So I'm going to say PO match. And I'm going to go ahead and submit it, but I do want to highlight we do have an approver section here as well. If for some reason this was outside of range of the purchase order, you needed to get additional approval because that's just your process. Even with the purchase order, you still need the invoice to be reviewed and approved. You absolutely can kick off our configurable workflow. In my case, I want to highlight for you guys how quickly this can flow directly into Dynamics GP. So with the match, I'm going to go ahead and hit submit. And you'll notice that invoice is now out of my queue. I'm going to do one more purchase order invoice before I go ahead and highlight the integration to Dynamics GP. In this instance, I'm navigating to the purchase shipment invoice or the two-way match. And the reason that we're able to drop those into different queues is because, remember, we're extracting all that data. We know what the purchase order number is, and we know exactly what type of purchase order it is with that initial step as we extract the data and pass it back to GP for validation. So I'm going to go ahead and click into another invoice here. I'll go ahead and hit the pencil icon for edit. And same scenario. Shame on me, I continue to put the same invoices into my demo environment. But again, this is highlighting that I have two of the same invoice number for CDW. So it's presenting me with that duplicate warning. That way you guys are ensuring that you can really focus on those invoices that are most important. Maybe the vendor sent it directly into an email box you have established, as well as to the manager that ordered it, and that got forwarded in twice. This can ensure that you guys stop in your tracks and don't process those duplicates. Again, I updated the document number to read Endeavour to ensure we don't have any challenges here. And it's turning again into a validation exercise. It extracted that purchase order number yet again. So we're doing a validation. We have one at $788. We have one at $42, two at $156. So we're confirming yet again we have a match. Well, we almost have a match, right? This is $1,209. However, this is $1,229. So you can absolutely, it missed the freight component. So I can go ahead and grab that freight. If for any reason that the ktIQ, the OCR tool is not, we have different confidence ratings set up on different fields. If it's not certain that it captured or it's got the correct information, it will leave it blank to ensure that you guys do a double check on that. In this instance, freight is not a required field, but if for some reason it is a required field and that's left blank, that's your stopgap to ensure that you get that in there correctly. So yet again, I have a PO match. I say approved. I don't need to say any of that. I'm not required to put any comments in here. I just want you guys to be able to see that flowing through. And again, I have the ability to select and a workflow as needed. Because it is a PO match, it may be able to go directly into GP, and that's what I'm going to highlight for you guys today. Before I do so, I do want to highlight a couple other elements here. You do have the ability to go and do a purchase order search here. So if for some reason it was not able to successfully extract the purchase order number off the invoice, we always remain real-time connected to your Dynamics GP environment so you can do that query directly from GP.
So now we're going to switch gears and look at a payables invoice where we are going to do the direct GL coding. And this is where things like taxes might come into play, or multi-currency, or anything like that that you might have at the payables type of invoice. So great transition, excellent question, and we're going to show you exactly how that works here in what we call the Pro client, which is our GP professional client. And this was designed specifically for those types of use cases where you need a little bit more control over invoices that have GL coding, especially if there's things like tax schedule IDs that need to be honored when you receive invoices. So I'm showing you here an invoice that came into a queue, much like the ones that Tiffany showed you. I skipped ahead to the point of getting right into the data on the dollar amount and the taxes and the distribution. So to address specifically the GL distributions, let's first add a tax schedule ID. Now you'll notice my screen looks a little bit different. Again, the Pro Client was designed for very specific use cases, and it looks and feels and functions down to the lookup windows and the arrows to the right of these fields, as you can see, just like GP. It was designed to connect to GP in real time, just like ktIQ does, but it goes a little bit deeper in terms of the functionality that it provides with things like tax schedules. So let's just assume that we need to add some GST for this purchase. I pick the tax schedule ID, again, real-time connected to GP. It's going to pull from your available tax schedule, so it's relying on your setup that you have in Dynamics, and it populated that field for us automatically. And then now let's look at our GL distributions. You see that I had this invoice from Image Maker Advertising. So I had my perch line for my inventory finished goods, and I've got my credits in AP, but I also now, just by virtue of selecting that tax schedule ID, populated a tax GL as well. Now here's the rest of the story. If I needed to change these GLs, redistribute something, add a line, or I just forgot what the code was for, marketing banners or whatever it was, I can do a real-time lookup right here into GP. So again, I'm real-time connected. I have that access. I can add or redistribute these GL codes as needed. I'm going to go ahead and say okay. Now, oftentimes you may not have the tax amount specifically on the invoice. It may just assume that you're going to add those taxes due to a tax schedule. If it does have them here, of course, you can enter them as well. Most times we see customers want to use the tax schedule, of course, to leverage that automatic calculation. So once I receive this invoice and I've done my data entry, my GL data entry essentially, because that's really all I needed to do to validate, I can pick an approver. Now, in Tiffany's situation where she was showing us the purchase order related invoices, they were already a match. There was no approval routing done. That's typically the real world scenario that we see with customers for purchase orders, because if you're using POs, chances are you had that PO approved before you issue the purchase order, before you made the purchase. So by the time the invoice comes, it's too late. We've done our homework, or at least we should have done our homework by that point to get everything approved. So if it's a match, it can go straight into GP, which is what we'll take a look here in a second when we get back to TIFF. But I'm going to show you the same thing from a payables perspective, okay? The data entry will be done for me through ktIQ, just like it was with Tiffany. And again, all I did was my GL coding. But most times, a payables invoice still needs to route for review and approval, because it's either a budget owner, a department manager, somebody that's responsible to say, yes, we are in fact supposed to pay them for these banners because we have an event coming up. Hopefully someday soon, maybe in this year. It'd be nice to have an in-person event as well as the fun that we have in webinars. As great as this is, we'd love to see you guys in person. So we have this done. We're going to route this invoice to Mary, department manager, for approval. And that's what Tiffany meant too when she said we can configure the workflow for you. In many cases, invoices need to go to one person who's responsible for a specific budget or department or whatever. In some situations, they need to go to maybe one or two people, depending on the dollar amount, the threshold of approval, whatever their limits of authority are, that kind of thing. So once we kicked off that submit button and we sent that invoice, you can see it's now out of my queue. It disappeared from the queue. It's now being sent to the next person in the process, Mary, department managers, who we selected to route that to. So we're going to log into ktIQ just like Tiffany did, because in my data entry, data validation experience, I'm Mary, the AP person, right? I validated, I did the coding, all that great stuff. But now sending it on for approval, I'm going to put my department manager hat on, get to wear my marketing budget owner hat here, and I'm going to come into my task queue, much like what Tiffany showed us a moment ago. Now, the interesting thing about this is that in many cases, and there's our email notification, I was just going to mention that, in many cases, people are on the road. And again, someday, again, even if we're not on the road, we're on our phone and we have work access to our email, access to our work email on our phone. So I could be, standing in my kitchen, I could be at the coffee shop, I could be wherever. and I'm going to get an email notification of this same approval, but I'm going to show it to you here first. So I received this notification that as an approver, I get this invoice, it falls into my budget, I'm in marketing, I need to review and approve it. Well, I can approve or reject right from the interface here. I can also approve or reject from email. But in the online experience, I have a few more options too. I can delegate. If I say, hey, you know what, normally these come to me, but this is for a special project, I'm going to send it to Tiffany. I can type ahead, find Tiffany's name in the list, and send it on to her. And then if there's a second level of approval or whatever, the rest of the workflow will continue as defined, okay? But here's the additional value of this, and you'll get this data in email too. I can see the GL codes. I can see the workflow history. I can see the access to that information right there as to Mary in AP did the coding, Mary department manager is waiting now for approval, okay? Or I could email this document. I might say, hey, Michael, I need you to check this out. Is this what we normally order from them? You know, all of those sorts of things. I have additional options here in the online experience. So let's look at that email approval really quickly here. I get this email, I'm on my phone, I take a look, I scroll down, yep, codes look good, 5,000, yep, that's what I expect. And I can simply approve or reject right here from the email. And by the way, the invoice is attached for us in this experience. So I can look at it on my phone or in my email and whatever device I happen to be working, okay? So we're gonna minimize that. We're gonna go ahead and approve. And again, comments are optional, but we're gonna say Scott said to Rush, because we love working with Scott. We wanna make sure that his marketing stuff gets taken care of right away. You can see then that that invoice disappears out of my queue and is now going to go into GP. Now I'm going to show you the payables transaction entry, and we're going to jump back to Tiff really quick, and she's going to show you the purchase order creation of those transactions. But here's how it works with a payables transaction inside of GP, which is the flow we just went through. The invoice came in, it was coded, it was validated, it was routed for approval. Once those invoices have been approved, one or many levels, they come into the PTE form connected with QuickTag, okay? So under the additional menu, these are where all the QuickTag options come to life for you. You see tag documents, that's how you attach documents related to transactions, view, search, etc. But workflow documents, invoices that have gone through workflow come into what's called the work queue. So we're gonna go view work queue, additional view work queue, that's the QuickTag command that we're looking for. That's where we find invoices that have already been approved. And it's going to display for us all of the ones that I might have waiting in the queue here. Here's the one we're working with. It says Scott said to Rush, so we know right away that's ours. We can also validate the invoice number, the date, etc. But we can look at this information and see all of that data again. We've got our AP hat on, right? We're about to create this invoice into a batch in GP. Maybe we want to look at the document again. I have that option. Right-click, view the document. Maybe I want to see all the details. Right-click, look at the details, make sure my approvers didn't change something they weren't supposed to, code something inaccurately, whatever. We can add those steps into your workflow as well so they can even go back into an APQ, which is often what our customers like to do. In the interest of time, I'm going to show you how to create it directly here into GP from this work queue. So I select a batch. I've got that row highlighted. I could, of course, multi-select and put them all into the same batch, but I'm just going to use the one that we're working with so my friends don't get mad at me because we share this environment. And so we're going to create the invoice that we just worked and then had approved by Mary Department Manager. So we come into the voucher lookup, and sure enough, here's our image maker voucher created for us automatically. Total amount includes taxes, distributions, and GLs already coded for us, including the line item for the taxes that we entered at the Pro Client in step 1 when we were doing our indexing. And then for additional support and for that audit trail, or when you need to find those documents, right, save yourself that 30, 40, 50% of time, additional view document now includes the invoice that we just validated and routed for approval. So that's the way that it works with a payables transaction. Tiff, are you ready for me to send it back to you to show us the purchase order experience there?
I sure am, and thanks everybody for your patience with my environment there.
Awesome. Hey, Michael, if you could send it back to Tiff, everything
Sure,
is collapsed for me. That'd be great.
Yep, and I love it because of how seamless that was. It's the same on the PO side as Tiff will show us, but there was no downloading of data, no uploading into GP. I just love how it just appears there in the work queue and ready for you to add to a batch or create a new batch with. So nice job.
Michael, great point. There's no export, there's no import. It's always real time connected to the GP environment for sure. So we did both that two-way match and the three-way match. So I will go ahead and start in the Intermatch window for the three-way, right? So requisition was created, purchase order was generated, receipt came in, invoice came in, and we confirmed that it was a purchase order match. So we're going to go find that because it was created real time upon, in our case, what was the last stage of approval, which was just validation that it was a PO match. Same as Mary, you're going to find it under the work queue. Any transactions that we create for you guys in a workflow capacity, come to the work queue to ensure your team has the ability to review it and assign it to the appropriate batch. So there is we updated that vendor document number to read Endeavour, make it a little easier on us, no more squawking at us for duplicates. There's our PO match. Same as Mary, I'm going to go ahead and hit create. I drop it into my favorite batch, TA, and let's see that seamlessly created in GP for you guys. So we'll go do a quick search on that batch. Here it is. And the beautiful thing here, if you'll recall, is there was no data entry that occurred on this, you guys. We leveraged ktIQ to query the information directly from the invoice. It populated all those required fields directly in our application. We did update it to include the word Endeavour, so we had that duplicate warning wiped out, but all those lines have pulled through seamlessly. There was zero data entry completed on this one. And same scenario here. You're able to see all the supporting documents. So as I hit view document on this particular transaction, it actually pulls forward not only the invoice, that's the invoice that we reviewed and validated all the ktIQ data extraction information right there, invoice, but you'll notice is that it also is highlighting that there was a purchase order document that was tagged on this particular purchase order number. So what happens is in QuickTag, we are a full document management system. We want to be able to ensure that you can digitize any supporting documents and tie those back to transactions in your Dynamics GP environment, different pages, journal entries, vendor cards, obviously invoices and purchase orders. But in this scenario, we pull into one view for you. So you have a full purchasing package. We're saying, hey, there is additional supporting documentation specific to this same PO number. So we want to be able to present both options for you to be able to view and see those specifics. Now, let's go ahead and take a peek at that two-way match, and that's under the receiving transaction entry. Same as we've stepped through here before, you're always going to find QuickTag in the additional menu. Because we create it via workflow, we're going to see it in the workflow queue. Here's our CDW invoice. It was that PO match, and again, I'm going to drop it into my favorite batch, TA, for my initials there, pretty common. And we'll do a quick search. Here's that invoice. Now, in this one, you guys will remember the only thing that we did adjust or pick up is it missed the freight. So I did type in the freight information. But again, otherwise, it extracted the vendor number. And the key element here is it extracted the purchase order number and all the receipts associated to it so we could facilitate that actual three-way match. Same scenario here as well. We can view documents. As we view the documents, again, you have the invoice that came in yesterday, purchase order information, additional information. But I do want to highlight for you guys how easy it is to tag additional information. So if I hit tag and play on our name, right, QuickTag, which would be attach documents, I could attach additional information directly to this particular invoice. We have this barcode here. We certainly have barcodes that we can issue to you guys that you can leverage maybe on a receiving doc when you're getting lots of paper documents to handle. So that's a great efficient way to get paper documents ingested into the system. You can always browse out and grab a file off your machine, something that you've saved to your machine. Maybe it's a contract or additional information specific to this particular order. But the one thing that people really love and appreciate is the ability to drag and drop information directly from email. As Mary was showing, you can review and approve directly from email. We live and breathe in email. So maybe we got a new contract in specific to this order, and I've got an email in here with an attachment for a contract. But what's beautiful here is you can take the entire email, drag that email directly into this window here. It's prompting me, are you sure you want to continue? Yes, I do. And I can associate the entire email as well as that attachment directly to that transaction. So if I go back into view documents here, it's going to highlight for me. It takes just a moment for it to scan it, but it's going to highlight for me that I have additional information. This is highlighting that it's an email. And what's nice about that is that email is permanent record of this particular transaction, the entire thread as well as the attachments, even if that employee were to leave. So this really allows you guys to leverage the full document management capabilities on top of triggering workflow for the AP automation components. So that's a little bit about, wrapping the process specific to AP automation. I'd love to talk a bit more about, some success stories that we've had with different customers. And Michael, I love this. Michael just hijacks the screen. It's perfect. Keep coming with any questions that you guys may have. We'll get back to those in just a moment here. But as we step through the power of KwikPayables and AP automation, we do want to really highlight how it comes to life for other organizations. This is a customer success story that I had the pleasure of working with. This is a healthcare provider out on the East Coast. That is a really unique organization that supports special needs children. And honestly, they are a perfect example of, it was not a, if or when, it was, we must do this now pain point of COVID. They absolutely had AP automation on their radar. But late spring last year, they said, we cannot continue to operate this way. We're having such a difficult time of getting invoices paid on time. We have many locations. We have tons of remote employees. We need to automate this process and get it integrated directly within the application. And just as Mary and I have highlighted, they had non-purchase order invoices and purchase order invoices. So kind of the full gamut of, of scenario that we just walked through is very similar to this particular case. So in this case, guys, it's obviously leveraging Dynamics GP. They had an AP team that was now working remotely, only coming in to cut checks. But more importantly, they were receiving over 2,500 invoices per month. So they were overwhelmed in really just how it is that they could automate this process and make it more streamlined for people as everybody came more remote in capacity. Another thing that they did take it full advantage of the Cloud environment, because they really needed to get up and running very quickly. They didn't want to put any additional strain on their internal IT team as they were supporting people working in a remote capacity. And one thing we didn't walk through today, but we definitely do additionally have, is a payment batch approval or a check batch approval. So once we digitize all these documents for you guys, we don't want you to have to, when you're ready to cut those checks, print out the paper yet again. We actually have workflow that supports a payment approval process as well to ensure you guys remain fully digital as long as possible. So again, these were post-COVID implementation, and these guys have taken, total advantage of the AP automation path. They are getting invoices paid on time again. Everybody's able to find the documentation. But honestly, what they're also really appreciating, and they came into it with the pain point over invoices, is the full document management capability that they got within GP. So they do a lot of different journal entries, and they love the ability that they can tag their complex Excel worksheets directly to a journal entry that they're creating in Dynamics GP. So definitely a great success story. Specific to KwikPayables.
That's great, Tiff. Love to see that.
So on that one, I mentioned that particular client had, a lot of volume. They had about 2,500 invoices per month. That's some high volume. We really want to highlight for you guys, though, that AP automation can be affordable for smaller, medium-sized organizations as well. And when we met with Scott and said, "Hey, Scott, how can we best present our solution?" He said, "Let's make sure they understand where price points are." So I put together two different scenarios here. The top chart is highlighting 10 users, and that could be, one or two people in AP, and you got a handful of managers that need to review and approve invoices. And without a ton of volume. This says 833 invoice pages per month. That's kind of our minimum, so that's why I dropped that in there. But what I want to highlight is for a smaller organization, you guys can go to the cloud in year one at $30,000 and get AP automation up and running. You would then have a recurring cost right around $14,000. The customer hosted line on there, it's a little bit more expensive in year one, obviously, because you're buying it outright, you're hosting QuickTag, standing up those servers on your own. And if that's your path, we can totally support you there. So you're all in at right around $37,000 in year one. Your annual recurring cost, because you are doing that hosting, is a little bit less, right around that $5,000 range. The second chart that I dropped in there was a bit higher volume of invoices. More employees would be accessing the KwikPayables environment. And one thing I didn't highlight above, I just was giving your total cost in year one is, I hope you guys see that service fee is really constant, $16,500, $16,500. We will assess your situation and lock in your service fee rate at the time of the business development process. We have been in this space for over 20 years. We've worked exclusively in the dynamic space. We know what gaps exist. We know what challenges we come up against. And because of that, we lock in a fixed fee service price. We don't want there to be any surprises for you guys. So in your particular scenario, check in with Scott, just a few bits of information, and we can definitely highlight for you guys, what your cost would be so you can get a better idea if it's something that you can budget for this year or upcoming years.
Perfect. Thanks, Tiff. And I will just highlight, one of the things that I'll go back to that pricing slide for just 1 second in case anybody was taking notes. Scott's recording the session though, so we can share this information with you, or you can get a more custom quote based on your scenario. But one of the things, Tiff, Michael, Scott, we've probably all seen this, is that OCR, which is what we show in the form of ktIQ, intelligent data extraction, it really used to be kind of cost prohibitive, because in what I'll call old school OCR, used to have a lot of configuration. There were invoice templates to set up. There was training the system to read I's and L's and ones, and character recognition kind of thing. With what we've demonstrated today and have included as part of the solution, I mean, it is a separate line item here, but Tiffany has it included in these numbers for ktIQ. It's an intelligent AI-based, because it's reading those invoices like a human would. All of that setup and configuration and invoice templates and the cost that goes with those steps goes away. No longer a thing that you should stumble over when you think about having a fully integrated and complete AP automation solution. So all that's included in these pricing examples that Tiffany's sharing with you here. And so you don't have to think that, gosh, but what's it going to take to set that up? Nope, it's all baked in, and because it's intelligent, it's going to continue to get smarter without you setting up a new vendor template and vendor recognition kind of a thing every time you add a new vendor in your environment. So keep that in mind as well. Thanks for sharing that, Tiffany, as we went through that scenario. So hopefully you've seen by now, all of you who have joined us today, the overall benefits of going digital. We named some of those challenges at the beginning, right? The time, the cost, the no visibility, the bottlenecks, the compliance challenges, audit trails, all those sorts of things. Once you add an AP automation solution like KwikPayables to your environment, all of those issues, the time and the manual data entry, gone. Your invoice approval workflow is now accelerated exponentially, and everybody has the visibility that they're supposed to have based on their permissions and their role in the process. And then the completion of those transactions being submitted to GP is just one more efficiency step, and it'll take it through the point of when you're ready to create those payment batches, as Tiffany mentioned as well. It increases your employee productivity. It lets your finance team focus on finance instead of paper chasing and data entry, right? Nobody wants to do that all day. And it ultimately decreases your paper cost. You know, we had one customer tell us that they got their paper cost. They started out with everything on paper. Once they added QuickPayables into their environment, they got their paper cost down to less than 12%. So what they used to be spending and having on paper was down to less than 12%. So they actually measured that. If that's something that's important and that you're tracking in your organization, certainly we'll want to help you build that business case as well. You eliminate the duplicate data entry and the duplicate payments and everything that goes along with that. Tiffany highlighted it for you in the demonstration, because now everything is stored in QuickTag. Even if it lives in GP, those documents are accessible and visible from GP or QuickTag. You gain the visibility, you eliminate the bottlenecks, all in one centralized, secure system. And finally there, you can take advantage of early pay discounts and reduce all that manual searching so that we can pay bills on time or even early. Who does that anymore, right? Because we don't have access to it, but now we do. So what we demonstrated for you today, just to kind of close out the conversation about where QuickTag lives and how we integrate, as Tiffany mentioned, we are specifically in the dynamic space across all of the ERP systems in the dynamic stack. However, what we demonstrated for you today was QuickPayables for GP with our end-to-end AP automation and integration there. Business Central is next, and what's great about if you're going down the cloud path, if this is something that you're considering, if you go with QuickPayables for GP today or in the near future, let's just say, and you decide down the road a year or two or whatever to add that, to move to Business Central, you can literally just move your QuickPayables environment. Our QuickPayables for Business Central will be available at the end of summer this year. So it's in development, and we'll have that ready in just a few months. So it's not a decision that you have to make of if or not, you know, when to do it or not. It's a matter of if you go with GP, you'll be able to move it to Business Central for no additional cost. And if you do go with the on-premises environment, then you'd be purchasing the Business Central solution when that's ready, if in fact you go down the Business Central path. So that's where we kind of see the two, that's why they're on the left, GP and Business Central. That's where we hear the most discussion in today's environment. And so that's where a lot of people want to know, if I start here, can I move? And the answer is absolutely yes. And the cost doesn't change unless your number of users changes. So all of that would remain the same. Okay, so a couple of things that we, again, didn't have time to highlight. We could show for hours, probably more deeper level training sessions and that sort of thing about all the different integrations, but this is a key consideration, especially if you're a GP user, for looking at AP automation, and that's elements like binary stream multi-entity management. We support that for everything that we showed you today. Purchase order, non-purchase order invoices. If you're using binary stream MEM, we have that integration built in at the time of invoice indexing and creation in GP. So no logging in and out of systems and multiple, you know, journal entries and do to, do froms and all that taken care of with our binary stream integration. And then on the flip side of that, Solver and SalesPad, a lot of people use SalesPad for GP transactions for sales order management, and then use QuickTag as the document management repository and access to that centralized system. And we have integrations on four different, the key four screens in SalesPad for that. And then Solver has built an integration for reporting such that you can drill back into documents that live in QuickTag as well. So it's important when you're looking for an AP automation solution that you find one that works with all of the tools and all of the systems in your environment. And so we like to highlight those integrations if that's a consideration for you. Just to close up with a little bit of highlights around us, we've mentioned that we're, you know, been doing this for a long time. We started in 1997. At QuickTag, we are a Microsoft development partner, and so as we've mentioned a few times, we're very much committed to the Microsoft space. And from a document management standpoint, which is where we started 24 years ago now, we were the first to integrate as deeply and as extensively across the Dynamics suite as we are. And as a result of all of that, we have more than 120,000 users around the globe. And so we're confident that we'll be able to relate to your scenario, help you solve your challenges in AP, and work with the team at Endeavour to make sure you get the best solution possible. And Tiffany and Michael will be available for any questions or specific quotes or anything like that. But Michael, yes, do we have other questions from the group?
Yeah, this was great. Thank you guys. And we do have some questions. We're running close to the end here, so I thought maybe Tiffany,
Sure.
you showed how the contract was added to that record there in GP at the end. Denise was asking, do we keep records of the packing slip in the system as well? So maybe you could touch base or touch on that, and then also talk about implementation time, because that's another question we get.
For sure. Denise, I saw that question. Great question. I pulled my props out. These aren't props. This is really good materials. So I mentioned that we have barcodes available. So when I popped open that window and dragged and dropped the contract in, there was also a barcode. Those barcodes would marry up to the registered user. You basically register a roll of barcodes. And this is a perfect example for a receiving dock or a receiving desk, right? Packing slips are coming in. You're going to peel off the sticker, put it on the very first page. It could be a 10-page packing slip. But all the packing slips or all the materials that came in that day, you would take that entire stack, you'd flip it over on your printer, copier, scanner. You don't need specific hardware. We program that, that software. You hit a button, you flip them over, you hit a button that says scan to QuickTag, and it will marry up this packing slip to the receipt in Dynamics GP. So 100%, this is a great use case that you mentioned, that you definitely can digitize those packing slips and tag them to the receipt, the purchase order, and the invoice. It'll be a full purchasing package, definitely. Timeline, Michael mentioned, yes. So I would say we can go much faster than we do sometimes, right? A typical time frame is really 6 to 8 weeks for full implementation. And the reason being, guys, is when you kick off an automation project like this, you really think through a lot of your business processes. We can be ready to go in 2 to 3 weeks, but the typical time frame really is 6 to 8 as we look at connectivity to your GP environment, and you guys just working through your business rules and processes, what the workflow looks like. How often do you want to send reminder notifications out to an employee that hasn't reviewed and approved something? When do you want to escalate moving an invoice out of somebody's queue that hasn't reviewed and approved it? So there's a lot of features that you guys will be able to take advantage of as we configure the software. And by all means, we can run really quick, but we'll also walk right alongside with you with our experienced project managers to ensure you guys kind of can see what best case scenarios are working for other QuickTag customers as well.
That's great. Thanks, Tiff. And Denise, there's a couple other questions you mentioned here. We'll definitely follow up with you afterwards. And certainly, as Mary mentioned earlier, reach out to Tiff or I with any specific questions along the way. And Scott, I'll pass it back to you to close up.
Thanks very much. Do I get a slide? For those that are watching the recording, just, for those that are new to Endeavour, I've been around for 30 years now. 3 lines of business: advisory services, implementation and upgrades, and then ongoing optimization and support. Dynamics GP, as well as Business Central and Nav, and then all of the Microsoft Cloud products to help you surround your systems and integrate them with cloud applications, including QuickTag. So reaching out to Endeavour, you can connect with Trish, James, or Steve, and then we'll pull in the QuickTag team, and we are here to help you. Our values are integrity, trust, and accountability, and ultimately we want to help you guys succeed and make your business that much better. And that's why we're pulling in the experts with QuickTag, and our consultants are here to help you. So, thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Yep. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.